Hey, welcome back, SENCOs. How are you doing at the moment?
I'm a year older.
Oh yeah. Happy birthday to you.
No.
Why can't I sing happy birthday? Oh, I want to sing happy birthday. Well, let's get rid of Abigail's birthday. Just chuck it to one side. We can sing happy birthday to her at the end of that. If you want to see me sing happy birthday to her, please do stay to the end of this lovely video where we are going to be talking about the demands on SENCO's time. Now, we're going to be talking about time allocation, we're going to be talking about time management, and the SENCO time calculator, which doesn't really exist, but hey-ho, and SENCO release time. All of that is going to be in this wonderful, really structured, very well-prepared video that we are doing, of course.
So, going back to our survey that we did just before Christmas.
Back to the survey.
Back to the survey. One of the questions was, or one of the statements was, the demands on my time related to SEN have grown significantly. And again, it was that scale from 1 to 10. And probably no surprise here that there was nothing...
15.
There was nothing below a 4.
Oh.
So 70% of individuals rated it as a 10. So that's kind of goes with the video we did last week where we talked about workload, and that one where we talked about what is it that's increasing somebody's workload, and we said at the time we weren't really sure where that was coming from. Was it from more teaching? Was it from more admin tasks? Was it from more SEN? Was it from other roles like the DSL or EAL coordinator and all the rest of it? This one is very specifically saying the time related to my SEN has increased significantly, so the demands on that time. Now, your response to this is the increase in EHCPs.
It's going to be the increase in EHCPs, Abigail. Didn't you know that it went up 10% for the last 7 years? This is an amazing amount that it goes up by. And that means that over the last 7 years, it's actually gone up, not by 70%, no, because it's accumulative, by over 100%. And these SENCOs are crying their eyes out every single day now because they've got more work to do on the same money because the government have freezed their money for so long.
What's he going on about? Have you lost the plot?
Possibly. Just fancied a bit of a rant.
Okay, that was a good rant. So yeah, we have got an increase in EHCs, which may well account for some of that demand, but I actually don't think it's that.
Oh, why?
Because, and this is going to sound a little bit ironic, because everybody will roll their eyeballs at me and go, no, Abigail, you're not right. When a child has got an EHC, yes, there's a legal obligation that sits alongside it, but also there is generally a funding and staffing allocation that sits with it as well. So your EHC students are probably not the ones that are causing the greatest demand on your time. Depends where we are.
Okay.
And whether or not their needs are being met. Okay, so if you assume you've got a child with an EHC whose needs are being met via that EHCP, then they are probably not the greatest demand on a SENCO's time.
They're being dealt with.
Yeah. So actually, the biggest problem is coming from those complex students who haven't got an EHC, so we're trying to gather evidence, or the ones who just would never hit the criteria for an EHC, as in, yes, we know what the criteria are, may have a special educational need that may require special educational provision.
I still don't like that criteria.
Neither do I. I kind of sit there sometimes and wish, you know what, I wish I would just say they need a diagnosis. And I know that's really controversial, but it would just make life so much easier.
It would make life much easier.
It's almost like that mental health committal thing that if you're going to be committed to a psychiatric ward, you need to have 2 doctors sign off on it. They're not diagnosing you with anything, but they are saying this person needs this level of care. I kind of feel an EHC should be like that. Yeah. We're not diagnosing them with a particular issue, but there are 2 professionals who are of the same opinion that this child requires support to do it.
Yeah, but in a conversation I had with somebody around the same kind of thing, and they were kind of agreeing with me when I was talking about this, they said, yeah, but all you're doing is you're pushing that number of people then onto the professionals, but the professionals as in the diagnosee people, but they can't cope with it either, and there isn't enough of those. So that's just going to kind of bottleneck in that piece there, because there's not going to be enough people to diagnose all these people then.
Yeah, and I get that, which is why I'm saying they don't need to diagnose. They could just go down that same mental health capacity route of two professionals who are saying, yes, we agree, this child needs... Anyway, but that's beside the point. I think it's that increase in students with, I'm going to call them behaviour issues, because at the end of the day, yes, behaviour is a communication, but we have got children coming through showing quite extreme levels of behaviour that are not necessarily special educational needs based.
Yes, and I watched one of the videos that you were watching yesterday and was like, really, that goes on in schools? No way, I can't believe that goes on in schools. You have to restrain some children?
Yeah, we were watching a positive handling video. It was interesting actually watching your response to that, because I've done restraint training. It was called restraint training in the day, and I don't think you realise that is the kind of thing I used to have to do.
I was like, no way, you didn't have to do that. What are we putting teachers through? Why are they having to deal with all this for?
Because we have an increasingly complex society.
I'm not going to give my opinion on what the society is at the moment, because I'll probably get shot down by a lot of people for my viewpoint, but yeah.
Well, I think people know my opinion. There's a little bit of cotton wool parenting, which doesn't help. And I'm not saying there's a lot, but there is a little bit of cotton wool parenting going on. There's a lot of this is my legal human right, but taking it to the absolute extreme of legal human right. It's getting very, very complicated. And I think those that don't necessarily fit underneath SEN category, but their needs are pulling on the time demands of the SENCO because people are trying to make them fit the SEN category so that the SENCO becomes responsible for them.
And that's simply because the may have is so woolly that, you know, anybody could have it. If I was a child back in school, and you've seen how I react on some of these videos, I would be going for an EHCP. Why not? Let's go for it. Let's see what we can get.
I think I'd have got one by the end of the first week in school, to be honest.
And that never used to happen. And as more and more people kind of come up with really weird, and I'm talking professionals here now, professionals come up with more different terms and language that is being used for what is basically the same condition as it used to be, and then we'll see more and more people kind of go, oh, this is a new one that's come out, and this is a new one that's come out, let's try and go for that.
Yeah, I think you're right there, because you know, there's always that question. It comes up every year. I've got a child with this. Where do they fit on Census? Actually, I like the categories on Census. And I know people will disagree with me on this as well. People are just going to sit and rant at this video, I think.
That's fine. Comment the rants at the bottom of the thing. We don't mind.
I like the Census categories that we have for special educational needs because they have been around for so long. They provide the best picture of need.
Yep.
Whereas when we start adding in new categories, so I'm not saying that these categories are wrong, but I'm just going to use some examples. So we've got PDA and ODD, both of which generally fall underneath that ASC, ASD. It's ASD on Census. Both of which fall underneath that banner. And I don't think it's always necessarily helpful to have that as a separate label.
Yep.
And if we suddenly start adding in, well, okay, let's add the PDA label. You'll get 3 or 5 this year, and then you get 15, and then the percentage will increase on that, and your ASC ones will go down theoretically. And your data, you cannot predict trends. You cannot see what's going on, and people don't actually know what Google search term to use or which book to go and refer to because there isn't enough literature out there that is on those terms. Yeah,
and those census categories do give really good structure to what we are trying to do and what a lot of the other professionals doing. So if you go to our website and you look through our resource section is all set up by
Census.
the census codes, because that's the way that, that's the way the government have done it. And if those census codes change by the government, then hey ho, they change by the government and we'll have to rewrite it.
But it's also the reason why I'm not incredibly keen on the 4 broad areas of the code of practice. Because if let's say I decide that a child has a cognition and learning need, what the hell does that mean? Am I allowed to say hell?
Yeah, you can say hell. You just can't say it more than 4 times.
What does it mean? Because cognition and learning could mean they've got a very mild difficulty with spelling.
Mm-hmm.
It could mean that they cannot read or write at all. It could mean that they have profound and multiple learning difficulties and are, unable to speak their own name, say their own name, recognise their own name, all of that kind of thing. What on earth does cognition and learning mean if you just go for those 4 broad areas? I hate the 4 broad areas. I don't find them useful at all. I was really surprised when the original Code of Practice went for that. And I don't think it's actually helped in terms of services, because when you go to a service with, I've got a child with an SEMH need, what SEMH need? Are we talking ADHD?
Yeah.
Are we talking somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder? Are we talking a child with anxiety and an eating disorder? They're 3 very different things. What service do I go to? SEMH is just too broad.
Yeah.
To sit underneath that. But going back to this question, increased time demands on SENCO. Yes, I think some of it comes from that increased evidence for EHC applications and support for teachers, etc. I think it also comes from those kids who are not necessarily SEN, who are being pushed in the direction of SEN.
Yep.
When actually we've got a whole load of societal factors going on that are feeding into this. And I know people will argue with me that ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, probably falls underneath mental health, but actually every school now has a mental health lead. So put it underneath your mental health lead. Yes, if you feel that mental health need is offering something that's additional to and different from, they can go on your SEN register as well. But that workload should be falling to your mental health lead.
Yep.
Now, if you're also the SENCO and the mental health lead, you need your own head checked.
Yep, you do.
Why? Because they are very demanding roles. If you're a very small school, I get it.
And the DSL and the head teacher.
Oh, gosh.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? We do feel sorry for head teachers out there that are in primary schools and being the SENCO and being the mental health lead and being the DSL and being everything else, because you just don't have the staffing capacity to be able to do that. We understand that completely.
Absolutely.
I think one of the other important things that kind of leads to SENCO workload and has led to this explosion of people trying to kind of get EHCPs is the fact that social media is out there pushing all these different categories and rights and everything else, for it to kind of come up on every single person's feed, and then, oh, this is what I did to do that, and this is what I did to do that. And that sharing culture was never there previously. And while that disadvantaged some people within that community, it also meant that the training and capacity of staff was able to kind of keep up with the demands of those people. But since social media has started pushing all of this, what you've seen is everybody's knowledge level seems to have gone up, or everybody's knowledge level they believe has gone up, or whatever social media wants
Google
to
Doctor.
Google Doctor. But the capacity of training for the staff is so slow and it can't keep pace with it. So, yeah, that is another big factor, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily just to do with the fact that the social media has increased parental knowledge and student knowledge, but actually our staff training, we know that staff training has gone, I was going to say downhill. That's a really unfair thing to say.
No, your staff training is absolutely epic.
It's not what I meant. We know that staff training, the demands for that have skewed, they've changed. So in 2010 you might have got a session to sit and deliver dyslexia friendly school or something, but come 2015 it was all about data and how do you improve your Fisher Family Trust data, or you've had a new MIS system in school, so perhaps you've moved from Sims to Arbor. Well, there's a whole staff training that has to sit with that, and because we have directed time in schools, it has to come from those hours. Well, if you're going to take up staff training on how to take a register and how to record the grades of your test or whatever, and that's going to take 3 hours, well, that's 3 hours of your SEN training that's possibly just been taken out, or even 3 hours of teaching and learning. I do think, though, that teaching and learning, if I'm thinking back again to when I was in school, teaching and learning was not dovetailed well enough with SEN at the time, and I still think the two of them are sitting as separate strands rather than one strand that sits together.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a whole school kind of SEN push through on absolutely everything that they do, rather than kind of, oh, well, we'll just put the SENCO in for one session this time here because we need to make them feel better about themselves.
Or we need to meet our legal obligations.
Well, that too.
I think there's a number of different ways of doing that, though. I think either you look at every staff training session that is put on. Let's say it is, we're moving to Arbor, I'm going to learn how to take a register. And I think there should be at least 5 minutes, probably 15, dedicated to every single training session of, and how does this benefit SEN? Or how do we adapt this for SEN? Taking a register is a bit of a strange example, but it may just be, where do you find your SEN data? You know, where is that flagged on that? Is there a pattern, or are you just not there on a Wednesday morning? What happens on a Wednesday morning? Is this one of my SEN students? Does the SENCO need to know about this? Because actually that'd be a more interesting conversation than Freddie's always late, or whoever it is.
Freddie. Daisy.
It's Frank. I've had to change it to Frank recently.
Have you?
I tend to use a student who has a multitude of different needs, so they've been Frankensteined.
Oh, God. Someone else will nick that now. But you've said it on the YouTube video.
Frankenstein, my student.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So I think that is one place where we can really improve things in school, is to dovetail teaching and learning with our SEN, but also to start looking at any training session that's going on in school, any staff meeting, anything has to have SEN underpinning it. It has to be there as part of it. Going to the other things that are increasing the demand on the SENCO time, though, so we've got that the students have been farmed off onto us, etc., but we've also got staff, teachers and TAs who are inexperienced in dealing with things themselves, because over time things have changed, and now there's almost that expectation of, I've got a child with SEN in my classroom, I want a TA with them, or I want a TA to support me. Well, actually, no, the TA's there to support the child, but let's not even go there. But over time that's become an expectation, and if we go back, I say I trained in the 1990s, I didn't have a TA in the classroom. I think I've probably been teaching 5 or 6 years before I actually had a TA in the classroom, and only then it was because she was really extreme, and we needed a TA there, but I only had her in the afternoon.
Okay.
So we've almost de-skilled our own staff.
Yeah. By
providing them with things. It kind of reminds me of the EEF research where it talked about learned helplessness. So when you give somebody so much support, they then learn to rely on that support rather than doing it for themselves. But like having an automatic car, I kind of feel a bit of learned helplessness. I daren't go back to a manual, by the way, because it's like, oh no.
And you were the one that said, "Oh, I'll never be able to drive an automatic in my."
I feel de-skilled.
Do you?
Yeah.
I don't feel de-skilled.
No, that's because you drive both.
I drive an automatic truck, and I drive an automatic car, and I drive a manual car, and I can drive anything anyway. I can drive a tank if I really wanted to.
Please don't.
I have.
But I think we've had that de-skilling, but also it's that other mantra of the EEF of least help first. And sometimes I think as SENCOs we kind of go, oh my goodness, this child's at crisis point, I'm going to throw everything at them. And then the teacher comes to expect that everything is going to be there. Yeah. And when you try to withdraw it, it becomes really difficult to withdraw it, not because the kid can't cope, because the number of staff can't cope. Yeah,
and we're doing some stuff on cognitive load theory as well, coming up next month. In the magazine, in fact, you've got quite a few pieces with the EP. I think Lynn's doing one for us on well-being as well, covering much the same kind of subject as this. And we're also doing executive functioning within cognitive load, which is going to come from Victoria. there's a lot of stuff there that then links back to the number of demands that are on teachers and SENCOs around the workplace.
And ironic, my master's dissertation is on the cognitive load of teachers. We've got that increase in SENCO time. SENCOs should have time out of class to do the SENCO role that is not just their PPA time. So PPA is for planning, preparation and administration of your teaching role. If you are a non-teaching SENCO, you shouldn't expect to get PPA because you are not teaching. However, you should have time out of class that is separate from your PPA in order to do that if you are a teaching SENCO.
What does that involve? So their time out of class
is to do their SENCO role. Coordinate the SEN, not do the SEN.
Yeah. So that's like your inspections and things like that then?
Yeah, well, so it could be...
Observations, sorry, not inspections.
I know what you mean.
Observations.
So, yeah, it could be going and observing a student. It could be collating some information, although I would argue collating information is actually an admin task. You may be better off to get a TA to do that for you. And yes, that does mean taking a TA out of a classroom to do it. But and to be fair, TAs are pretty good at observations. And they don't get picked up as being, why is that person in the room? Because kids kind of accept them being there and they don't behave differently. I always think an observation should be done by somebody who is a regular visitor to that child in that
so they
room.
don't change their behaviour like every school does for Ofsted.
Or when the EP comes in, they're like little angels.
Ofsted's coming in, let's all be really, really good.
So yeah, it's that time to coordinate everything. It's that time to look at your strategic plan, to make sure things are in place, to go and do that learning walk, to find out whether teaching and learning strategies are in place that support the SEN students, to go and see what day-to-day working is like in the classrooms. It is not the time for doing the SEN.
Okay.
In terms of how much time a SENCO should have, that's really debatable. I know there's the Bath Spa research out there that suggests times.
The magic SENCO time calculator.
It's not really a calculator. It's kind of like a table that says if you're a small, medium or large school, whether you have a low, medium or high percentage of EHCPs, and then it gives a suggested number of days or half days of SENCO time. And actually you'll find that with some of the secondary schools, it actually... it says something like 9 days. It's like, well, you can't have 9 days for one person, so that's obviously 2 people that need to do the role.
Deputy SENCO time.
Deputy SENCO time. And I do have a thing around that language there as well. So Deputy SENCO to me is somebody that can step into the SENCO role should the SENCO go absent. So they should be, to me, a qualified teacher. They should have the same requirements as the SENCO has. So they should have the SENCO award. I know it's going, but that's where we are. And they should be a teacher. An assistant SENCO, to me, is your unqualified SENCO. So you're teaching, you're very, very good teaching assistant who is absolutely amazing but doesn't have any teaching qualification. So they're the one that wouldn't be able to step into your role. They're the one that wouldn't be able to hold that title should you get knocked down by the bus tomorrow.
And just to add to this, because we had a conversation with a school around this, and they said that their higher level TA was actually on the SLT.
Yes.
Because they needed that information to be gathered by that level and then disseminated by that. And it also made that high level TA to feel more valued.
Yep.
Within that role. So that's a really good idea. So take that aboard as well. Put one of your high level TAs into your senior leadership team.
She is actually amazing. In fact, she's coming to the SENCO conference.
Well, loads of people are coming to the SENCO conference, but we're not going to talk about that now.
No, we're not, but she is coming to the SENCO conference. So, yeah, you've got the Bath Spa research. It gives you a recommendation. It is, however, only a recommendation. It's not written in stone. Every school is different. So when you read that, you might read it and go, oh, it says I should have 5 days. So that means I should be a non-teaching SENCO. Not necessarily. It could be a split role. So one person does it 3 days, one person does it 2 days. Because I actually, I am very controversial, as everybody knows. As a SENCO, you have actually got to be a really good teacher. You've got to be able to model that teaching. And if you are a completely non-teaching SENCO, where is your credibility? And I'm not saying that those SENCOs have completely lost credibility, because I think some people will be cringing there going, but I am still a good teacher. How do the other teachers know that?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see, but we also talked about there being an inclusion leader as such who sat above the SENCos.
Very often is in larger
and who
schools.
who then facilitates the position of those SENCos and what they're doing at the time throughout the whole trust, so that everybody knows what they're doing. So a bit of a management person for SENCos rather than it just being the head.
Yeah, so somebody who sits between the two, perhaps. Maybe that person sits on SLT, because there's always that question, should the SENCO sit on SLT? It is a recommendation within the SEN Code of Practice, but it doesn't say that SENCO must sit on the SLT. It says that it could be somebody who has the SENCO's voice on your behalf.
And to be honest, if you want your time off over the holiday periods, don't go on the SLT, because you don't...
No, it's slightly different. You can be on the SLT without having the SLT wage. So there is a difference. So you can be on SLT but not take the leadership payment. So you're still paid on main pay scale, MPS or UPS, wherever you are, plus your TLR for leading SEN. Again, I'll be controversial. I don't believe it should be the SEN point. The SEN point is for delivering to SEN students, teaching SEN students. And let's face it, if you're a non-teaching SENCO, which SEN students are you actually teaching?
Exactly.
You are a TLR, because it's a teaching and leading responsibility. You are coordinating a group of staff.
Yeah.
So to me, it should be MPS and TLR, or UPS and TLR. However, if you take that step onto the leadership spine, you lose your Burgundy Book. And most people know what I mean by the Burgundy Book. It's the School Teachers Pay and Conditions document, STPCD, and it is... within there, that's where you have your 1,265 directed hours, plus whatever it takes to get the job done, which is a little bit vague. And if you move onto the leadership scale, you lose that very useful bit that says 1,265 plus whatever it takes to get the job done. But you can still be on SLT, but not be on leadership scale. So it's worth having that conversation.
So if you want to keep your holidays, don't go onto the leadership pay scale.
Basically. The BASPAR research is based on the number of EHCs. What happens when you've got lots of students who are SEN Support or K? And I used to have a bit of a rule of thumb for that. So for every child who was SEN Support, I used to count them up, and I used to give them 10 minutes per half term. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it works out as an hour over the year. So if I've got 100 children in the school who are SEN Support, I need 100 hours over the year to meet the needs of the SEN Support, or to track the needs of the SEN Support. That is only 10 minutes per half term. That is not a lot of time. To me, it was just a really crude measure. And I'm not going to argue over 10 minutes here or there, but it's a really crude measure to get that kind of rough, how many hours do I need for SEN Support, rather than just being for the EHC students. And I think that's becoming a bit of a big issue in some schools now, is that the SENCO is seen as the EHC coordinator, not the SEN coordinator.
I think one of the hardest points is that in-between phase when they've got their EHCNA application in, and they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and it takes ages to kind of come through, which it shouldn't do.
20 weeks.
But it can take a long time. And we were talking to one SENCO who said it took nearly 3 years to completely go through the system because of all the arguments and everything else they had. What do you do with the child at that point there? That's extra workload for you. And, that's not kind of working on your time. It's additional to your time that isn't allocated anywhere except for this.
Well, it is because they're a K. They have to be a K for you to say may have a special educational need.
Yeah,
so
they're going to have a bit more than...
So they're only going to have 10 minutes.
They're going to have a bit more than 10 minutes though, aren't they?
Yeah, and I get that, but that said, the coordination for an EHC should actually be easier.
Right.
Because you've got a legal document that says this is what you've got to do.
Yeah.
And then because the SENCO generally, or shouldn't be, delivering that.
No.
Because you are the coordinator. You are checking that it is being delivered. It's the meeting at the end that is the issue. And that's the other one that comes up is, how do I fit in 3 reviews a year for children I put on my SEN register?
When I've got 54 on my SEN register.
Yeah, which is, okay.
One every 3 days.
You can do it that way if you want.
One every 3 days. Well, it's one every 3 days if you work 7 days a week at least, anyway.
But it's not the SENCO's responsibility to have those reviews. It's the SENCO's responsibility to coordinate those reviews.
Yep.
But not to hold those reviews.
Yep.
So it could be the class teacher, it could be the form teacher if we're in secondary, it could be the head of year, it could be natural parents' evenings, it could be the TA or a key worker. I'd like to think that SENCO meets every parent of a child who's on the SEN register at least once a year.
Yep.
I'd like to think that. I know that in some schools it's not feasible. But there should be somebody, and it doesn't have to be a physical meeting. No. It can be, I mean, we've got online now, it could have been a phone call. It could have been a document sent home with a letter to say, here's the review of your child's provision this last term, this is what we're doing next term. It doesn't have to be a dialogue, if you like. Much better if it is a dialogue, don't get me wrong, because we want parent voice, we want pupil voice, we want that co-collaboration and all the rest of it. But if you are struggling with that 3 times a year, you can't scrap that bit. That's in law. You that's the bit you've got to meet. But there are ways around it.
I want to ask a silly question because I'm not a SENCO.
Silly.
So here comes a silly question because I'm not a SENCO. So does it have to be a formally booked meeting to be regarded as a meeting of those things? So we do lots of SENCOs do coffee mornings. Say take that for example. And if the parent,
if they have a quick chat with them
if
about
the parent
that,
pulls you to one side and goes, "Oh, I'd like to talk about this here," then is that counted as one of the meetings? Can you count it?
Yeah, of course you can. But what you would do is go make the record of that, because what it says in the I'm going to use the code of practice rather than the CAFA. But what it says in the code of practice is that you have to record those reviews. Well, all I have to do after having that conversation at the coffee morning is go into whatever system it is I use for recording my review, whether that's on Sims, whether it's on a Word document, whether it's in your provision map, put the notes of that meeting to say, had a quick chat, happy with all provisions, happy for them to continue next term.
So if you constantly run coffee mornings with all your parents that are there,
you're meeting them more than 3
and
times.
then you're meeting them more than 3 times, and you just write down what happened in the coffee meeting, and if they had any issues, they came to you at the end.
Yeah, you wouldn't write about every parent you'd seen, but
you would put down, I've met that parent, I've met that parent, I've met that. No, nothing. You'd do it all without actually having to have all these.
Yeah, we do it all the time. It's a little bit like teaching. When somebody comes to you and says, "How is Frank doing in maths?" and you're the maths teacher, you don't go, "Oh, I'm going to have to do an assessment to work that out." You go on your conversations you've had with Frank over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, of course you would.
So it's exactly the same from an SEN perspective. Yes, there does need to be a bit of a formal process somewhere in the year.
Yep.
But not as formal as everybody is trying to make it. Because you're making more work for yourself. What we're actually looking for is a picture. We're looking for a history, a chronology, if you like. And if I have to have a coffee if I have a coffee morning every week and I meet that same parent every week and there's a bit of a picture building up there, that's actually far more useful than having a meeting 3 times a year where they've probably forgotten half of the things they've just told you.
Yeah, and that's the same. We do this at work. Every time I come in, I'm sitting there talking to the manager for like 20 minutes because I like to be nosy and I like to know what's going on, and they like to be nosy about what I'm doing as well because I'm not just a driver as it is. And that kind of chronology there of how we're developing that way is also something that you can use for your TA. You can use it for your performance reviews and all that kind of piece there. Absolutely. So have the conversations constantly. But just make notes.
Make notes, record them.
Of what the conversations were about and how.
As bullet points.
Yeah, use bullet points. Don't write bloody essays for things. Oh no, I didn't say it, so we're okay. That wasn't the 4th time. It's not going to kill me off. Don't make notes. Don't make more work for yourself by writing essays. Keep it to bullet points. Keep it short. Keep it simple. And then you kind of you're saving yourself loads of work.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is collaborate with everybody. So whatever those conversations are the parent is having with you, Are they having the same conversations with a TA? Are they having the same conversation with a class teacher? Are they having the same conversation with the head of history? If everybody got into the habit of recording a couple of bullet points after those conversations, actually you'd have a really rich set of data. You'd also stop. I've had this happen to me. One member of staff saying one thing, one member of staff saying the other, and the parent trying to play you off between each other. Which can happen when you have a disgruntled parent.
Yeah, and if you use the things like your provision map data entry piece, which I'm sure that's I didn't know what it was called, so I was guessing there was something in there for that. If you use that kind of piece, it will then link it to the data for the child, and then everybody else will be able to see that as well. So you can just keep feeding into that. It's a really, really good piece of software.
Meetings log within provision map, or you can use, there's a notes section within Sims, there's one within Arbor, there's a flagging section. I'm sure there's one within ScholarPack as well, actually, even though ScholarPack's but it exists within lots of systems. But even, like I say, just a Word document or even an Excel spreadsheet works just as well. Put the kids' names down one side, and each time you meet them, you add them into the column. It's not ideal, but it works. It's somewhere to share that information. So the other thing I wanted to say was about those reviews. So reviewing 3 times a year. Remember that reviewing data is a review. So if you've delivered a provision or an intervention, you are gathering data. So you've got your baseline data, and you've got your possibly interim data, and then you've got your end assessment data. So that is a review of sorts. Now, usually most people will do those half-termly, termly. Sending a report home with that information on it counts as part of a review. Again, it would be nice to have that co-collaboration, the conversation, the discussion about why the child didn't make as much progress as expected, but it doesn't have to be face-to-face. It could be an email exchange, it could be a text exchange, it could be one of these messaging systems that we use in schools, so class charts and Dojo and all the rest of it, where you've got a messaging system going on. It can be done via that. It doesn't have to be a physical sit-down 1-hour meeting with everybody 3 times a year, because nobody has got time for that, and parents haven't actually got time for that, if we're perfectly honest. They would rather have drip-fed information every 6 weeks.
Yep.
And a quick phone call.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that, and it's the same as what our blog posts are. Our blog posts are drip-fed little tiny snippets of information rather than reading the whole thing, because no one's got time to sit and read a massive document, unless you're really interested in the subject, of course.
Yeah, I have to say, I hate school reports. So they've changed over the last couple of years, and we only get 1 school report a year now. And it is because they were trying to reduce teacher workload, which I kind of get, but you get a single sheet of paper, 2 sides of A4.
Yep.
I thought you were going to grab one then.
No, I'm not. I'm going to turn the heating off.
Get 2 sides of A4. On one side, it's got, and I'm talking primary, we've got the 3 core subjects with are they at age-related expectation. On the other side, you've got your foundation subjects and a tutor comment. Do you know what? They're the most useless piece of paper. I feel like screwing it up and throwing it back every single time I'm handed one, because it does not tell me anything about my child.
No.
So I'd rather, every half term be told, oh, we're doing Florence Nightingale this term. Xavier came up with some fantastic suggestions. He wouldn't be doing Florence Nightingale. Lysander came up with some fantastic suggestions of what the war looked like in the Crimea. Just a single comment like that is far more valuable and useful to us as a family than this very bland rubbish report at the end of the year.
Your child is meeting expectations.
What exactly? Okay, or even worse, your child is below expectation. Okay, how far below? And that's where your small step progress comes in, of course.
Yeah, which you've got video on that, which is actually watched for quite a lot. So if you want to go and see that video is going to be, I'm going to put the link to it here. So under the SENCO Solutions side, it'll be somewhere anyway. I think that covers most of our stuff. We've talked about absolutely everything. So just to kind of go through it, we've talked about time allocation, we've talked about time management, we've talked about the time calculator, the magic SENCO time calculator. There isn't one. And we've also talked about release time for SENCOs on the job, and how to kind of share their roles with an assistant SENCO or a deputy SENCO, and what the difference is between the two, according to Abigail, which is always a valuable point to kind of raise.
I just think it's the same language as you use in schools. So a head teacher, deputy head teacher, deputy is expected to deputise. An assistant head teacher isn't.
Tomorrow night we have the NAHT. Robbie Williams is coming to join us from the NAHT, and he is going to talk about protecting yourself as a SENCO. So we know that there is a lot of SENCOs out there who have difficulty because although the SENCO role is needed within the school, there are lots of movements that happen with the SENCO role, and then they push the SENCO out. So that happened to Abigail, and Abigail's going to talk about her part somewhat of what happened to her, and then we're going to kind of join the discussion of protection. So get yourself protected, SENCOs. Sounds weird, doesn't it? So if you remember rightly from our last video, we were at BET last week, and I have to say thank you to Text Help and thank you to Google for the absolutely brilliant party time. Yes, I did some partying, and you can see all the videos and photos that we took up on the website. We'll put it on there. I'm not going to put it on the video.
Did you enjoy Hamilton?
I loved Hamilton. Hamilton was the best thing ever because there was a legal person in it that could sing.
What am I thinking of it? Did you enjoy the play that went wrong?
The play that went wrong, well, it did go wrong. I'm still, did I like it? Did I not like it? It was a bit...
And did you enjoy your sing-along West End brunch?
I always love a good sing-along, so anybody who knows me will know that I am loving singing. And talking of singing, I promised you something at the end that we would do. So, Abigail's birthday was on the 29th of January, so just for you, my darling, are you ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
I'm sorry, everybody.
Happy birthday, dear Abigail. Happy birthday to you.
You actually managed 3 notes that time.
Did I manage 3 notes?
Yeah.
Whoop, whoop.
It's better than the 2 you usually manage.
Well, I can't really manage more than 2 notes because my voice just doesn't allow me to do that.
Take care, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. The other one is, the other thing I wanted to say was so exciting, I've forgotten it.
Congratulations. I'm going to give you... Oh, holding these on. We're going to be in the same place. My hair hasn't grown at all. Although I'm going to have a haircut next Tuesday, so it's going to be very weird. I might go that way a bit more. Put my head there. Oh, God. You just put your hair up?
Yeah.
She randomly put her hair up there to make it look different. Oh, no. Hold on. I've moved that piece of my hair at the back there.